Good evening. My name's Colin Brett, and I'd like to welcome you all to the British Institute of NDT webinar on certification. This is the first of three webinars that will be presented by Patrick Bolton of BI-NDT's Certification Services Division. The plan is for Patrick to present for about 25 minutes, after which there will be time for questions. You're welcome to type in your questions as the webinar progresses, as we will be monitoring your inputs using the chat facility at the top right of the screen, or you can wait until the end of the presentation. If we don't have time to answer all of your questions, we will post replies on the BI-NDT website. With that, I'd now like to hand over to Patrick.
Good evening everybody, and thank you for that introduction, Colin. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Certification Webinar Part 1, 27th of April 2017. If I could give a brief introduction, as Colin said, my name's Patrick Bolton. I'm a certification engineer with BI-NDT, and as you can see, my contact details are on the screen should you wish to contact me directly at some point in the future. So, I'd like to start, if I may, with a brief introduction on who BI-NDT are and what our role is within the NDT community. So setting the scene as such, it's been my objective to provide you with a basic understanding of the certification process that PCN operates in order to provide you with the essential core skills and competencies required to certify an NDT task. So moving on, this is the first webinar, and this shall set the scene for the following two webinars scheduled for broadcast in May and June of 2017. Now, although specific dates haven't been set, we will be confirming them at some points during next week. The format of each shall be 20 to 30 minutes of presentation, as Colin has just said, with a 5 to 10 minute question and answer session to be held at the end of each presentation if required. If you would prefer not to ask questions directly, you may email into PCN or alternatively use the chat facility as the presentation progresses. So, BI-NDT, so who are we? Well, we're a professional institute for all those engaged in non-destructive testing and condition monitoring. We're concerned with the education, training and professional development of our members, and we like to think that we can promote the advancement and science and practice of non-destructive testing, condition monitoring, diagnostic engineering, and all other materials and quality testing disciplines. Now, to enable us to be able to carry out those functions, we rely on the continued support of personnel, companies, and other organisations within the NDT industry. So, I'd like to start with an objective. Now, it's my objective to get you thinking about the role that certification plays in all our lives as NDT technicians. After completing an NDT task and then signing to certify our actions have been in accordance with the various standards, procedures and possibly legislative requirements. So let us think of how everything that we do is often governed by some form of certification requirement. Within this series of 3 webinars, we hope to refresh your mind as to those requirements by providing you with a basic understanding of the certification process within the NDT inspection model as a whole. So what are we going to discuss? So in this first webinar, we are going to look at what certification is there a need for certification, what a world without certification may possibly look like, and the certification as a component of the NDT system. I'm also going to talk about how we can become certified and BI-NDT's role as a personal certification body to assist you at every step of the way. Webinar number 2, we would like to, if we could, look at where we obtain certification. I'd like to talk about the subtle differences between second party and third party legislation, stroke certification, and what a global certification package should look like. We're going to look at the standards that affect your certification. We're going to look at the sectors for which BI&DT and PCN offer certification within. And we're going to talk about the methods within a sector. How we and you can participate in any certification scheme development, and ultimately how we generate a syllabus. Within webinar number 3, we're going to look at core competencies and the multilateral recognition agreements and how these function to allow other organisations to look at and accept PCN certification against their certification systems, and vice versa. So we should look at the training and establishments and the world of NDT with a reference to emerging technologies. Now, when we talk about emerging technologies, we're talking about establishments such as RCNDE or the Research Centre for Non-Destructive Evaluation. Other areas could possibly we look into TWI and also academia, the universities that are also subject to NDT. We'll look at how we generate sample questions, and if you have a complaint, how we deal with your concerns on a rolling basis. But finally, we'd like to provide you with a route into BI&DT where you as an individual can help and assist us to make the system work for industry and yourselves. So I personally hope that you find the presentations informative and engaging, and I hope that you can continue to interact with BI&DT in order to shape your certification experience, which works well for both you and also industry. So I'd now like us to think about NDT and how BI&DT actually serve the wider community. So when we talk of NDT, we talk about non-destructive testing, condition monitoring, and also structural health monitoring. Now we see these three spheres as being interlinked, all having subtle variances in their application, but much commonality with their certification package. So within this presentation, when I talk of NDT, please take this to mean NDT, weld inspection, condition monitoring, and also certain elements of structural health monitoring and their certification processes. So what exactly is certification? If we were to look at the Oxford English Dictionary, certification is defined as the action or process of providing someone or something with an official document attesting to a status or level of achievement. And what we are saying is that that someone could possibly be you. So, do we really need certification? Well, certification has become a requirement in all typical quality systems, ensuring that engineers and technicians are able to demonstrate that they have the required levels of knowledge, skill, and competence. It is proven that NDT inspection activities are extremely operator dependent, where those in authority and members of the general public continually place great reliance on the skill, experience, judgment, and integrity of all NDT personnel involved. Indeed, during the fabrication, NDT provides the first line of defence before a product enters service. But when in service, NDT is often the only line of defence against possible future failure. So if our actions were not attributable, what might a world without NDT certification possibly look like? Now, for the purposes of this presentation, we are specifically talking about people and certification, but it would be prudent to mention that the equipment we use may also have a requirement to be certified. So in order to ensure that the measurements and tests that we make are both repeatable and verifiable. So a world without certification could possibly look like this. It may include a world lacking corporate liability. Could we be truly confident that the correct NDT methods and techniques have been applied, safe in the knowledge that the defects being specified can truly be found? Does the NDT operative have the skills, the knowledge and the relevant experience to correctly apply a method or technique? And if defects are confirmed, Can we confidently repeat the initial inspection to monitor any future possible fatigue crack growth? A world without NDT certification could have both serious and catastrophic safety implications for business, the NDT operative, and also members of the general public. So let's just take a moment to look back through history at an event that led to changes in the way we have changed our working practices by the inclusion of human factors principles within our certification and authorization model. On April the 28th, 1988, Flight 243 departed with 5 crew members and 90 passengers on board for Honolulu. Nothing unusual was noticed during any previous pre-departure inspections that took place that day. During flight cruise, events occurred which would see Flight 243 landing on Maui after an explosive decompression resulted in a large portion of the aircraft's crown skin becoming detached in flight. Multiple fatigue cracking, insufficient inspection and maintenance events were to be attributed as a root cause. These events would lead to industry inspection and maintenance standards being reviewed, and events which may be cross-referenced to other industry sectors and practices also. So, cracks have no preference for sector. Maintenance inspection program changes and mandatory human factors training were then adopted within the aerospace sector to ensure that events such as those described on the prior slide should never happen again. These changes were put into place to ensure that any future fatigue cracks like those associated with Flight 243 were captured at a point prior to them proving critical to any other aircraft structure. Practices which are just as relevant to all other industry sectors, such as the oil and gas sector, the power generation and rail sectors, as examples. So we see the role of certification combined with operator skill, competence and knowledge of human factors as being essential knowledge barriers to events as those just described. So we'd now like to look at elements to certification. Now a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but the failure of NDT to detect and characterize a defect might not solely be due to a lack of competence by the inspection personnel. So let us, if we can, expand on human factors principles which are of equal importance across all industry sectors. So both you and any employer should be aware of scenarios which have the potential to affect your ability to carry out the NDT task. For example, how tired are you feeling today? Do you work shifts? Are you working split shifts, earlys, lates, nights? Tiredness can have a huge effect on your ability to function. Have you suffered with distractions? Have you had a row with your partner today? Is your mind elsewhere but not on the task in hand? Have you become accustomed to carrying out an NDT task because that's the way it's always been done? Have you ever suffered undue pressure and don't feel that you have the authority to question another member's judgment? All questions that we must continually ask ourselves. So now when we talk of the reliability of an NDT system, we should consider these 3 variables: the equipment and any calibration certification attributed to the equipment, the procedure or task and associated requirements, and the personal certification requirements, which should also encompass the elements and references to human factors that we've just described. It is my considered opinion that when we specify NDT, it is only fair that we consider all of those listed factors within our NDT certification model. So it's our goal to ensure that you are aware of all these elements discussed within this slide. So how do I become certificated? How do I become certificated, I hear you say? NDT personnel can be certificated by various methods, and we shall discuss these in this particular section. Second party or in-house certification and third party or central certification. If we look at the second party certification, for example the scheme SNTC 1A for certifying personnel by a company procedure, the procedure is usually produced and operated by an independently qualified person who may be employed at your company or alternatively as an outside consultant. Now the main advantage of this system is that that companies with unusual inspection requirements can ensure that their personnel are competent only in the areas specific to their inspection requirement. A typical example of this certification system can also be found within the aerospace manufacturing sectors, where individuals are examined and certificated for each NDT task that they carry out, perhaps in accordance with the requirements of the standard EN 4179. Now, by comparison, independent or third-party central certification, for example the PCN scheme, candidates are required to pass examinations devised and set by professional examiners who are authorised by a certifying body, the certifying body having overall control over the certification process. In our case, PCN is the certifying body who control all PCN examinations. Certification is carried out in accordance with European and international standards and is independently awarded and verifiable. The authorised qualifying body or organisation approved to carry out your examination is independent of any single predominant interest and is authorised by the independent certifying body, or in our case PCN, to prepare and administer PCN examinations. So how will I know when I'm actually eligible for examination? So when we talk of eligibility for examination, we are inferring to the fact that we are capable of complying with the requirements of PCN Gen. The Gen document provides guidance on the minimum requirements that must be met with regard to your training and experience prior to you sitting any PCN examination. So examples of some of the minimum requirements are that we shall provide evidence that we have successfully completed a BINDT validated course of training at an approved training organisation. With regard to our experience, this must also satisfy the requirements of PCN Gen, but can be provided either pre or post examination. If you don't possess the required amount of experience prior to certification, this is no great problem, as we can hold your certificate open for a period of up to 2 years whilst you actively gain the experience required. This evidence of experience needs to be confirmed by your employer and then submitted to the BINDT authorised qualifying body by yourself for consideration prior to examination, or post-examination directly to BINDT by yourself if the experience is to be gained, as I say, after examination. So, PCN certificates. So having completed your recognised training course, gained the correct amount of experience and passed an applicable PCN examination, you should be congratulated. You will be issued with a certificate very much like the one that is shown on the slide, which will be valid for a period of 5 years. Now when PCN specify the validity of your certification awarded, this is in line with the requirements laid down by BSEN ISO 9712. Which states that certification renewal period shall not exceed 5 years. So what are BINDT's key propositions? BINDT's key certification proposition as a personal certification body is to ensure that its PCN schemes are operated impartially, meaning that the end users and employers must not be able to exert undue influence over any certification decision. The PCN scheme was the first fully accredited scheme to comply with BSEN ISO 9712-2012, a standard which features fully within third-party certification schemes. The PCN scheme meets 9712's requirements, allowing for certification to be valid within the UK, Europe, and also worldwide. Now, in order for the PCN scheme to remain compliant, it is audited on an annual basis by the United Kingdom Accreditation Service to ensure that we, as an organisation, are continually working in accordance with specified standards such as 17021 and 17024. UCAS are the national accreditation body for the United Kingdom, and this is a government-appointed body. Now, these people assess an organisation's ability to provide certification, testing, inspection and calibration services. If PCN fail to comply with the requirements of 17024, as audited by UCAS, the certification scheme has every possibility of being temporarily suspended or even permanently closed. So by PCN remaining compliant with UCAS, we shall continue to provide the PCN scheme. For further interest, our compliance is signified by the use of the UCAS accreditation logo, as can be seen within this slide. So, UCAS, BINDT 17024 and 9712. So just to reiterate, BINDT, as an independently accredited certifying body, has to comply with the requirements of ISO IEC 17024, or the general requirements for bodies operating the certification of persons, as confirmed by UCAS annual audit. If found satisfactory, PCN certification meeting the requirements of this international standard, 9712, shall be continued to be offered. So what do we see the benefits to PCN Central Certification are? Well, we can offer scheme integrity. We can offer total verifiable qualifications, which can be verified at areas such as the PCN verification app. We're nationally accredited, and we're working with recognised standards such as 17021 and 9712. We have worldwide recognition acceptance, and this will be proven later with the MRE agreements. We offer independent certification, and everybody that sat the PCN exam has demonstrated a level of skill and knowledge. So in this first webinar, we've defined the term certification by providing a working definition. We've shown that a world without certification could be associated with dangerous practices. We've asked the question, do we really need certification, and provided a clear-cut evidence to suggest that yes, we do. We touched upon the mandatory requirements associated with the various quality systems, standards, government legislation and regulatory bodies that set out the rules that allow you to become safely and effectively certified. We discussed how you became certified by meeting the requirements of PCN Gen. Excuse me. We confirmed PCN Gen is produced in accordance with the requirements of the international standard BS-EN ISO 9712, and we examined in brief the eligibility requirements for certification examination at an authorised qualifying body. We have shown that industrial experience may be gained either prior to or post certification examination, and that if your experience is to be gained after examination, this should be within the time frame of 2 years. We've shown that the certification model is built around fundamental principles, including equipment, personnel and human factors. Now sadly, we can show that knowing about human factors is in itself a good thing. An individual's behaviour cannot be guaranteed within the workplace, and that any external factors having influence on an individual's life could also have bearing on any inspection results obtained. I'd now like to briefly look at what we're going to be covering in the webinar part 2. So we're going to be talking about where your certification can be obtained. We're going to look at the subtle differences between second and third party certification. We're going to look at what we think the global certification model should look like, and we're going to go into greater depth around the standards that might affect your certification experience. We're going to look at sectors for certification, the methods within a sector, how we develop the PCN scheme, and also from this how we produce a syllabus. Within webinar part 3, we're going to go into greater depth around competency and the multilateral recognition agreement. We're going to look at training establishments and the world of NDT emerging technologies that encompasses such establishments as RCNDE. And we're going to look at sample questions and how the training schools interact with BINDT. We're also going to look at complaints and practitioner feedback and how you could possibly become involved. So I'd just like to move on and say that BINDT would like to thank you for your time in taking part tonight, and we look forward to your participation in part 2 of this series. As I say, the events are scheduled for May 2017, and we would now like to invite any questions that you might have. So if anybody's on the line who does have a question, then please feel free to either talk to me directly or talk to David on chat, or alternatively email in.
Oh, Patrick.
Oh, hi Joe, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And yourself?
Good, thank you, Joe. How can I help you?
Well, one of the things that I wondered was, will you be talking at some point about what happens after 5 years? You said the certificate's valid for 5 years, but what do we do after 5 years to maintain that certification?
Yeah, Joe, that's a really relevant point actually, and 9712 itself is due for revision and review. I've a feeling that that would be a good inclusion to make within the next presentation, Joe. Yes, so I take that on board, and we can actually discuss that.
Excellent. Thanks for that.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question, such as Joe's? Okay, so if nobody else has any further questions, I think we'd like to wrap up this evening's webinar, and we look forward to you participating at some point in May 2017. Thank you very much for taking part.
Thank you. Bye.